The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows down the narrow alleyways of the city. I had just finished my last lecture of the day, my mind still buzzing with thoughts of ancient artifacts and the stories they held. It was during one of those meandering walks, a search for inspiration, that I stumbled upon the antique shop. Tucked away between a dilapidated bookstore and a coffee shop that had seen better days, the shop had an air of mystery surrounding it, as if it were a portal to another time. As I stepped inside, the scent of aged wood and dust enveloped me. The shop was cluttered with items from eras long past, faded photographs, ornate furniture, and peculiar trinkets that seemed to whisper secrets. I wandered through the aisles, my fingers brushing against the surfaces of various objects, each one sparking a flicker of curiosity within me. Then, my gaze fell upon it, an old radio, perched precariously on a shelf, its design hauntingly beautiful. The intricate engravings on its wooden casing told tales of craftsmanship that had faded from modern design. "Hey there, young man. You have an eye for the unique," a voice called from behind the counter. The shopkeeper, an elderly man with a twinkle in his eye, approached me. "That radio has a history, you know. It's said to play music that lingers in the air long after the last note fades." I couldn't help but smile at the old man's enthusiasm. "What do you mean by that?" "Ah, it's a story as old as time. Some say it carries the echoes of its previous owners, while others believe it's been touched by something darker. You'd do well to treat it with respect," he warned, a hint of seriousness creeping into his tone. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but curiosity overtook caution. "I'll take it," I said, feeling a strange connection to the radio, a pull that was hard to explain. Back in my apartment, I placed the radio on my desk, dust particles dancing in the streaks of the fading sunlight. It felt like a treasure, a piece of history that was now mine. I took a cloth and began to clean its surface, revealing the deep mahogany finish beneath the layers of dust. After a few minutes, I noticed a small knob on the side that looked like it could adjust the frequency. My heart raced at the thought of discovering what kind of music it played. I turned the knob, and a low, static crackle filled the room. I adjusted it slowly, and just as I was about to give up, a haunting melody floated through the air. It was eerie, yet strangely beautiful, a symphony that felt both melancholic and captivating. The music echoed with a sense of loss, like the ghost of a memory long forgotten. I leaned back in my chair, letting the melody wash over me. It was unlike anything I had ever heard before, and I felt a chill creep up my spine as I listened. The notes were delicate, like whispers carried by the wind, and as I closed my eyes, I could almost visualize a scene of a somber gathering, a farewell to someone dear. Suddenly, my phone buzzed, jolting me from my reverie. It was a text from Mark, my classmate who always seemed to have a knack for brightening the dullest of days. "Hey Jake, want to hit up the cafe later? Heard they have a new blend that's supposed to be amazing." I smiled at the text, grateful for the distraction. "Sure, I'll be there in a bit," I replied, glancing back at the radio. As I stood to leave, I realized the music had changed, shifting to a more somber tune that echoed in my mind long after I switched the radio off. A week passed, and life continued with its usual rhythm, but something felt off. The eerie melody lingered in my thoughts, and strange occurrences began to unfold around me. The air felt heavier, laden with an unshakable sense of foreboding, but I pushed those thoughts aside, attributing them to my overactive imagination. Then came the call that shattered my world. I was sitting in my apartment, the radio silent for the moment, when my phone rang again. It was a friend, voice trembling. "Jake, it's Mark. He's gone. He died unexpectedly last night." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I was struck by a wave of confusion and disbelief. Just hours before, I had been chatting with him about coffee and classes. I felt my heart race as the haunting melody I had heard the previous night echoed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was somehow connected to Mark's fate. What had I brought into my life with that cursed radio? I sat on the edge of my bed, staring blankly at the antique radio that had become the focal point of my nightmares. The haunting melodies played on a relentless loop in my mind, each note a reminder of Mark's unexpected death. Guilt twisted in my stomach, a gnawing feeling that I had somehow summoned this darkness upon my friends. I couldn't shake the thought. Was the radio responsible? I had to find out. As I grabbed my jacket and headed out, I couldn't help but replay the last conversation I had with Mark in my head. "You need to stop hoarding antiques, Jake. They give you weird vibes." He had laughed it off, but I could see the concern etched on his face. "You should just stick to music, man. It's what you do best." Now, those words felt like an ominous warning. I had to talk to someone who understood these things better than I did. That's when Stella, the paranormal expert I had met at a school event, came to mind. She had a reputation for her knowledge on cursed objects and the supernatural. I arrived at her small, cluttered office, a place filled with oddities and artifacts that seemed to hum with energy. She looked up from a collection of crystals she was sorting through, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern as I explained my situation. "Jake," she said gently, "cursed objects can have a profound effect on their owners. They often attract negative energies and can amplify emotions, especially those related to grief and loss." "But Stella," I insisted, "Mark was fine before I got that radio. And now he's gone. There must be a connection. Sometimes it's not just about the object itself, but the intent behind it." She leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. "What you need to understand is that disturbing the dead can have grave consequences. If there are spirits attached to that radio, they may not be ready to let go." I could feel a chill run down my spine. "So what do I do? How do I break this curse?" Stella hesitated, her gaze drifting to a dusty book on the shelf behind her. "You need to know the history of the radio. Find out who it belonged to and what happened to them. The past often holds the key to the present." With a heavy heart, I left her office, feeling more lost than when I had arrived. I wandered the campus, the weight of the world on my shoulders. I could hear the muffled laughter of students around me, but it felt distant, like I was living in a world separate from theirs. When I finally returned to my apartment, the radio was eerily silent. I felt a mix of relief and unease. Maybe it was just my imagination, but the absence of sound was almost more unsettling than the funeral melodies that had haunted me before. I sat down before it, my fingers trembling as I reached for the dial. As I turned it, the radio crackled to life, but this time it played a different melody, one that sent shivers down my spine. It was a slow, mournful tune that felt so much darker than the previous pieces. I leaned in closer, my breath hitching in my throat. "Who are you?" I whispered into the empty room, as if expecting an answer. The melody intensified, swirling around me like a fog. I could almost see shadows dancing in the corners of my vision, figures that flickered in and out of existence. I felt a presence, a weight in the air that pressed down upon my chest. The radio's eerie tune morphed into a haunting, dissonant symphony, and I could almost hear whispering voices mingling with the music. "Jake," they seemed to call, and I shivered, realizing that whatever I had unleashed was far more sinister than I had anticipated. "Mark," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. But the only response was the chilling melody echoing through the room, wrapping around me like a shroud. I felt the walls closing in, and in that moment, I knew that I had to confront the darkness head-on. Time was running out, and I could feel the tendrils of death creeping closer. I had to uncover the truth behind the radio and its tragic past before it claimed anyone else I cared about. I sat on the edge of my bed, the ancient radio looming on my desk like a dark omen. The funeral music echoed in my mind, each note twisting like a knife. I had become obsessed with uncovering its secrets, the origins of this cursed object that seemingly bound my fate to a series of tragedies. I flipped through my notes, scribbled hastily during my frantic research. There had to be something more about the radio, something that connected it to the musician I had read about, a man whose life ended in heartbreak and despair. "Okay, Jake," I muttered to myself, trying to muster some courage. "You can figure this out." I grabbed my laptop and began searching for any information on the musician, his name a faint whisper in the back of my mind. Hours passed, and I felt the weight of exhaustion creeping in, but then I stumbled upon an article that made my heart race. The musician, Samuel Voss, was a renowned talent in his time, celebrated for his haunting melodies. But tragedy struck when he lost his wife and children in a car accident. From that day on, his music took a dark turn, filled with sorrow and despair, almost as if he were trying to channel his grief into every note. "Can you believe this?" I exclaimed to no one but the shadows in my room. I picked up my phone and decided to call Stella, the paranormal expert I had consulted earlier. "Stella, it's Jake. I found out more about Samuel Voss. His family died tragically, and it sounds like he went off the deep end after that." "Jake," Stella's voice was steady, but I could hear a hint of concern. "You need to be careful. These kinds of stories often come with warnings. The pact he made, if it exists, could still have power. It could be the reason you're experiencing all these deaths around you." "I have to know," I replied, my voice stronger than I felt. "I need to understand what I'm up against." "Just promise me you'll stay cautious," she insisted. "You're not just dealing with a cursed object. You're dealing with the remnants of a man's grief. That kind of pain can manifest in ways you can't predict." After hanging up, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The radio pulsed with a chilling energy, as if it were alive, waiting for me to make my next move. The shadows in my room danced along the walls, and I felt an oppressive weight in the air, as if death itself was closing in. I glanced back at the radio, my heart pounding. "What have you done, Samuel?" I whispered, half afraid the radio would respond. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the very essence of loss was haunting me. Determined, I rummaged through the clutter on my desk, searching for anything that might lead me deeper into Samuel's past. As I pushed aside old textbooks and crumpled papers, my fingers brushed against a small, cold object. I pulled it out, a key. It looked old, ornate, and unmistakably out of place. My mind raced. Could this key unlock something related to the radio? My heart raced with the thrill of discovery. Without thinking twice, I searched the radio for any hidden compartments. My fingers trembled as I ran them along the edges, feeling for any irregularities. When I found a small latch cleverly concealed beneath a decorative panel, my breath caught. With a soft click, the panel creaked open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, I found a stack of yellowed letters, their edges frayed with age. My hands shook as I carefully unfolded the first one. The words within were filled with despair, detailing Samuel's descent into darkness as he mourned his family. Each letter hinted at a pact he had made, promising to immortalize his music in exchange for something. "God, what did you do?" I whispered again, the weight of his sorrow pressing down on me. I could feel the shadows gathering closer, their whispers curling around my ears, almost like a sinister lullaby. Just then, my phone buzzed violently, breaking the spell. I glanced at the screen. It was a message from another friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in weeks. "Hey man, just checking in. You good?" A wave of dread washed over me. How could I reassure anyone when death lurked so closely? I needed to find a way to stop this curse before I lost more friends. I had to confront the darkness that Samuel Voss had unleashed. But the deeper I dug, the more tangled the web became. I could feel the presence of death tightening around me, a relentless reminder that time was running out. As I sat in my dimly lit apartment, the weight of the radio loomed over me like a specter. The haunting tunes that had once intrigued me now felt like a noose tightening around my neck. I couldn't shake off the feeling that I had opened a door I couldn't close, and every note that echoed through my cramped living space served as a reminder of my growing despair. The news of Mark's death had shattered any semblance of normalcy I once knew, and now I was left with a sense of dread that seemed to seep from the very walls. Determined to uncover the truth, I spent hours poring over old records and newspaper clippings about the radio's previous owner. His name was Victor Hale, a once celebrated musician whose life had been marred by tragedy. Rumors of his cursed legacy whispered through the pages, tales of a composition he never completed, a melody said to bind the souls of the departed to the living. It felt like a fairy tale gone wrong, but I was desperate for answers, so I pressed on, even when the shadows in my apartment seemed to dance with malevolence. After days of searching, I stumbled upon an old local legend. It spoke of a hidden composition that Victor had poured his soul into, one that was meant to bring peace to the restless spirits haunting him. "This is it," I murmured to myself, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The legend claimed that the piece had to be played at Victor's grave to finally silence the mournful songs of the cursed radio. As the words resonated in my mind, a mixture of hope and fear bubbled within me. Could I really pull this off? What if I failed? I paced back and forth in my cramped living room, visions of the graveyard flooding my thoughts. "I can't do this," I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. "What if I mess it up?" My heart raced at the thought of standing before Victor's grave, the weight of his unfinished symphony resting on my shoulders. Just then, my phone buzzed, startling me. It was Stella, the paranormal expert I had consulted earlier. "Jake, you sound different. What's going on?" she asked, concern lacing her voice. "I found something, Stella. A legend about Victor's unfinished composition. I think it could break the curse," I replied, excitement creeping into my tone. "Be careful. Cursed objects don't just let go easily. You need to be sure you're ready for whatever may come," she warned, her voice steady but laced with an edge of urgency. "I have to try. I can't keep losing people," I said, determination blooming inside me. "If I can play the piece at his grave, maybe it will end this nightmare. Just remember, Jake, the dead don't always rest easy. They may not want to let go," she cautioned. Her words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. I hung up the phone, my mind swirling with doubt and resolve. I gathered the scattered pieces of sheet music I had found, the notes still fresh in my mind, but the fear of failure loomed larger than ever. Would I even be able to play it right? What if the spirits were angry? As dusk fell, I felt the atmosphere in my apartment shift. A chill prickled at my skin, and I could swear I heard the faintest echo of music in the background, the radio's eerie tones mingling with the thoughts racing through my mind. "I have to do this," I whispered to myself, clutching the sheet music tightly. But then something shifted. I could feel a presence in the room, a familiarity that sent a shiver down my spine. The air thickened, and suddenly, the dim light flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. I turned slowly, heart pounding, and there he was, Mark. His form was translucent, eyes filled with an earnest urgency. "Jake," he urged, his voice a mere whisper, "you have to hurry. It's not just about the music. You need to finish it. We're running out of time." "Mark," I stammered, disbelief mingling with desperation. "What do you mean? How do I finish it?" "You know how. You're the only one who can break this. But you need to believe," he implored, his figure shimmering with intensity. "We're all counting on you." As I looked into his eyes, I felt a strange mix of fear and determination boiling within me. "I'll do it, Mark. I promise," I vowed, my voice stronger than I felt. But as he began to fade, I could feel the weight of the curse pressing down on me, a spectral reminder of the lives that had been lost. "Remember, Jake," he said one last time, "play it with your heart." And just like that, he was gone, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence of my apartment. With the radio's mournful echoes still haunting my mind, I knew I had to act. Tomorrow, I would venture to the graveyard, clutching the unfinished score, ready to confront whatever darkness awaited me. The storm raged around me as I arrived at the cemetery, the wind howling like a banshee, whipping through the trees and sending raindrops pelting against my skin. I clutched the ancient radio tightly in my arms, my heart racing with a mix of dread and determination. The air felt electric, charged with a sense of foreboding that matched the tumult above. In one hand, I held the unfinished score, its fragile paper soaked from the rain, but I couldn't let it go. This was my last chance to break the curse that had ensnared my life and the lives of those I cared about. Why did I let it come to this? I muttered under my breath, my voice barely audible over the storm. The shadows of the gravestones loomed large, twisted and dark against the flashes of lightning that illuminated the sky. I felt as if I were walking through a graveyard of regrets, each step echoing the names of friends I had lost. As I approached the musician's grave, a sense of weightlessness enveloped me, as if the ground beneath my feet had shifted. The air grew colder, thick with an otherworldly presence. I could almost hear whispers, soft, sorrowful voices that floated through the wind, weaving a tapestry of lamentation around me. "Jake, Jake," they called, their tones mingled with the sound of the rain. I stopped in front of the grave, the name etched in the stone, sending chills down my spine. The headstone was old, like the radio, as if it had been part of the earth long before I was born. I could see the intricate carvings that depicted musical notes intertwined with vines, a visual testament to the musician's tragic legacy. Suddenly, the whispers intensified, swirling around me like a storm of emotions. "You shouldn't have come here," one voice hissed, sending a shiver through my body. I turned, expecting to see someone behind me, but the graveyard was empty, save for the looming shadows of the tombstones. "Who are you?" I shouted into the darkness, my voice breaking with desperation. "What do you want from me?" The air grew heavy, and I could feel the weight of the souls surrounding me, their sorrow palpable. "We are the echoes of forgotten dreams," another voice responded, softer this time, as if trying to reach me through the veil of despair. "We linger because of you. You awakened us." I gripped the radio tighter, the metal cool against my skin. "No, I didn't mean to." Before I could finish my sentence, the whispers turned into a cacophony, a chorus of pain and longing that engulfed me. I could see them now, shimmering forms, their faces twisted in sorrow, hovering just out of reach, their eyes reflecting the pain of their untimely deaths. "Play it, Jake," a familiar voice broke through the chaos. I squinted into the darkness, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw Mark's face among the crowd. "You have to play it for us. Only then can we find peace." With trembling hands, I unwrapped the score, the paper barely holding together against the rain. My heart raced as I placed the radio on the grave, its surface slick with raindrops. I could feel the anticipation in the air, thick and suffocating. I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. "Here goes nothing," I whispered, closing my eyes as I began to play the unfinished composition. The notes formed a melody that danced through the storm, intertwining with the raindrops, a haunting lullaby that echoed in the depths of my soul. As the music filled the air, I opened my eyes to see the spirits drawing closer, their expressions shifting from anguish to something resembling hope. The storm settled slightly, as if even the heavens paused to listen. The melody swelled, resonating with the pain of loss and the promise of redemption. But with every note I played, the shadows grew heavier, pulling at me, urging me to stop. I could feel the weight of their sorrow pressing down on me, as if they were tethered to the music, desperate for release. My fingers trembled over the keys, every echoing note a plea for forgiveness, for understanding. Please, I breathed, my voice barely a whisper against the storm. Let this be enough. As I pressed my trembling fingers against the keys of the old radio, the air around me thickened with an otherworldly energy. The storm roared in the distance, but all I could hear was the cacophony of voices swelling around me, each note weaving a tapestry of sorrow and regret. I closed my eyes, focusing on the melody I had painstakingly transcribed, hoping it would be enough to break the curse that had ensnared me and my friends. Please, I murmured, feeling the weight of the spirits pressing down on me, their whispers swirling like a tempest. Let this work. Let them be free. Just as I thought I was making progress, a sudden jolt of energy surged through the ground, yanking me downward. It felt like an invisible hand clamped around my ankle, pulling me into a dark abyss. My heart raced as panic surged within me. No, I can't give up now, I shouted, my voice barely piercing the din of the wailing spirits. Then, without warning, the radio emitted a blinding light, illuminating the cemetery in a surreal glow. I squinted against the brightness, and in the flashes, I caught glimpses of my past. The laughter of friends, the shared moments of joy, tainted now by the specter of death that loomed over us. I saw Mark, his bright smile fading into a haunting expression. It was as if the radio was unearthing every memory, every regret buried deep in my mind. Jake, Mark's voice echoed through the chaos, strong yet distant. Don't let it take you. You're the key. The revelation struck me like a bolt of lightning. I was tied to this cursed radio in ways I had never understood. The deaths of my friends were not just a consequence of the haunting melodies. They were a part of a twisted fate that had ensnared me since the moment I turned the dial on that cursed device. Mark, I called out, desperation clawing at my throat. What do you mean? How can I stop this? Play it right. Finish the song. His voice cracked like a whip against the storm, urgency laced with the weight of despair. You have to embrace it, Jake. You have to confront the darkness within you. The spirits around me surged, their energies intertwining in a chaotic dance. A chorus of whispers filled my ears, blurring the lines between past and present. I could feel their anguish, their longing for release, and it intertwined with my own fear. Each note I played resonated with a truth I had been avoiding. My role as the harbinger of death was not something I could flee from. Drawing a deep breath, I steadied my hands and let the music flow through me. The unfinished composition began to unfold, notes spilling from my fingers like tears. The air shifted, the cacophony fading as harmony emerged. The spirits began to fade one by one, their faces morphing from anguish to peace. Keep going, Mark urged, his voice echoing in my mind. You're almost there, Jake. With renewed determination, I poured every ounce of my being into the music, each note a plea for forgiveness and understanding. I could feel the radio vibrating beneath my hands, resonating with the very essence of death and life. The melody swirled around me, lifting me, carrying me away from the abyss that threatened to consume me. Suddenly, the blinding light enveloped me completely, and the world around me began to dissolve. I felt the weight of countless souls lifting, their whispers transforming into a gentle hum of gratitude. Just when I thought I could transcend the veil between life and death, I felt a profound stillness wash over me. In that moment, I realized that I was not just breaking a curse. I was rewriting my destiny. The past, the pain, and the music all coalesced into something beautiful, a chance for redemption, not just for myself, but for all those trapped by the haunting melodies of the radio. Jake, Mark's voice resonated through the quiet, now tinged with warmth. You have the power to change everything. Don't forget us, but don't be afraid to live. And with that, I opened my eyes, no longer just a pawn in a tragic game, but a composer of my own fate, standing at the crossroads of life and death, ready to embrace whatever came next.